Gone is wide receivers coach Garret McGuire. In is Daikiel Shorts, Nebraska's new wide receivers coach, coming to Nebraska after 1 year at Kentucky. This was the guy Dana Holgorsen wanted, the guy Dana Holgorsen coached at one point, the guy that coached under Dana Holgorsen at Houston, and now he's coming to Nebraska, or is arrived at Nebraska, as their new wide receivers coach moving forward. Steve, your reaction to Garret McGuire gone,
Yeah, I guess it's
Daikiel
not a
Shorts
huge,
in?
yeah,
I guess,
not a
yeah.
huge surprise, I guess. Considering how Nebraska's receiving room was kind of under fire for most of the season. Everybody was kind of talking about it. The coaches, even Matt Rule, even the perimeter blocking from the receiving core was not good enough for most of the season. There was some improvement late in the season after Dana Holgorsen was inserted into the program and worked his magic to make things look a little bit better in that area. But for the most part, the perimeter blocking was really disappointing. So was their ability to get off the line of scrimmage, beat press coverage from Big Ten corners, win 50-50 balls. That was another area where Matt Rule, I think was kind of frustrated in with some of his guys not being able to come down the ball when you think that they should have, and when those opportunities, popped up. So, it, like I said, not a huge shock. It's been reported that Garret McGuire has been likely his next landing spot's likely going to be on the staff at Texas Tech under his father, Joey McGuire, the head coach over there in Lubbock. So, but yeah, Daikiel Shorts, Tim, he's a Houston guy. I know he's from New Jersey, but spent a lot of time, about 5 years, I think, in Houston. You're from Houston as well. You know the area well. What is Nebraska getting in Daikiel Shorts?
Yeah, I mean, you go back and look at his, I know some people go back and look at the numbers from Kentucky this year, and I'll say this as someone that is in the know with people in Kentucky and has a familiarity with Shorts as well. What happened this past year at Kentucky is not necessarily his fault. He was a first-year receivers coach that kind of came in late through the offseason, inherited a room that featured Dane Key, Barry and Brown, and Jamari Macklin. And they just had, inconsistent quarterback play, poor offensive line play, just weren't able to get things going. So I know some people are overreacting, I guess, a little bit to the numbers at Kentucky, but he didn't have enough time to really implement anything, develop anybody, or really make his presence felt at Kentucky. He did do a good job of recruiting while there, just like he did at Houston. And I think when you go back and look at his Houston resume, that's where you really start to see where his talent shines through. Him and Dana went and found Tank Dell out of junior college, brought him to Houston, and over the 2 years that he had Tank Dell under his tutelage, Tank Dell led the country in receiving yards across those 2 years. And was obviously uber productive. Went in the second round of the draft. Is now playing for the Houston Texans. He had Tank Dell help develop him from a JUCO player to a second round pick. He went out and recruited Jonah Wilson from Decaney down in Houston. He went out and recruited Matthew Golden, also out of the Houston area. Matthew Golden, currently a starting receiver at Texas. He transferred once Dana Holgorsen was fired last year as head coach. And so you've seen it across his timeline. He also had Samuel Brown, who now plays at Miami, been a very productive receiver over at Miami, transferred out. Joseph Manjack, who's been productive as well. You talk to coaches, you talk to players, you talk to assistants that work with him. Everybody I've talked to raves about Daikiel Shorts' ability to build relationships, about his ability to develop talent, and his ability to get the most out of guys. He demands excellence. I think learning from Dana Holgorsen, being coached by Dana Holgorsen himself as a receiver at West Virginia when Dana Holgorsen was a head coach over there. I think all of that, you see that trickle down into his ability to build relationships and his coaching style. At Kentucky, he had Kentucky, despite an up and down season, had Kentucky involved with some receivers they probably didn't have any business being involved in, considering their
Mhm.
record, considering some of the other people involved in that recruitment. They were able to get a four-star receiver from St. Louis. You look at what he's going to be able to do on the recruiting trail and where his relationships are. He's a guy that's originally from the Northeast, originally from New Jersey, kind of fits
Mhm.
in with a lot of the others on staff with their ties up to the Northeast. Um, you don't see talented receivers come out very often, as much as you do in other regions of the country from the Northeast. But if and when they do come, I'd expect Nebraska to be involved moving forward. Also, from his time at Houston, has really strong relationships in the Houston area, in Southeast Texas, in Central Texas as well. I'm expecting Nebraska to get themselves back involved down south with some receivers down there. He's got good relationships. And then his time at Kentucky also helped to build some relationships in that Appalachia area.
Yeah, I mean, just reading up about Daikiel, I think this is a good pick. Primarily for one reason, is because Dana Holgorsen wanted him in Lincoln. And what Dana Holgorsen wants, I think he should get at this point from what he showed with Nebraska's offense the final 3 games of the 2024 season. So, if he wanted Daikiel Shorts, he should have got he should get Daikiel Shorts. And so I think, Nebraska is well on its way to reshaping this offense that's going to go through a transition phase with Dana Holgorsen coming into play. But Tim, my next question is, does he bring anyone with Kentucky? I have my eye on one player. I'm sure you do too, Dane Key. We can talk about him next. He's a 4-star receiver in the 2022 class out of Lexington, Kentucky. So he was a local kid who signed with the Wildcats and spent 3 seasons there. Very productive receiver. He played in 38 career games. He started 35 of them. So he was out there as a true freshman. He, for his career, I think he has 126 catches for over 1,800 receiving yards, 14 touchdown catches too. I mean, you mentioned this past season, the 2024 season, it wasn't that great production wise with the touchdown catches. But again, look who the quarterback was over there with Brock Vandergrift, and just the offense in general. Kentucky wasn't great over there this season. So, with Nebraska set to lose their 2 big body tight ends and Isaiah Nair and Jamal Banks, who, by the way, combined for 74 catches for 968 receiving yards and 8 touchdown passes this season. Dane Key is that big bodied guy. Do we think that he could potentially, visit Nebraska as one of those portals? Dane Key is 6'3" and 210 pounds. That's some size that Nebraska's receiving room currently would love to have.
Yeah, I fully expect, once he officially enters the portal and once he starts making visits, I fully expect Nebraska to not just be involved, but potentially get a visit from him. They're going to do what they can to get him on campus and bring him in. I expect Shorts, I expect Holgorsen, I expect Dylan Raiola to all work on him and try to make him, a part of this offense. Dane's a guy that, I'm watching Kentucky the last 3 years. He keeps catching your eye,
Yes.
really strong hands, really polished route runner, can take the top off of defenses. Not a blazing guy. That's the other receiver at Kentucky that's also in the portal, Barry and Brown. I'm not expecting as much Nebraska interest there, just because Barry Brown's had a bit of an up and down type of career, probably best as a returner at this point. He is, holds the SEC all-time record in kick return touchdowns. But I expect, him to land somewhere in the SEC, ACC, or Big Ten. He's going to have a lot of options. So will Dane Key, but I think for what Nebraska's looking for, I think Dane just fits a little better. And I think you're going to see Dane Key kind of emerge as a top portal target for Nebraska and a bunch of other schools as the portal opens here in the next week or so. And that's one to very much keep an eye on. I think Key's a future NFL player. People even in Kentucky and across the country kind of thought this was a year where he might declare for the draft regardless. He had a career best season under Shorts this fall, despite the offensive struggles. And people thought, he still might have a good enough grade to declare for the draft. He still might, entering the portal doesn't necessarily mean he won't go to the draft. I expect he has some conversations with his agents and with people in the know to try and figure out what his draft grade could potentially be. But if he does choose to come back for 1 or 2 more seasons, he's got eligibility for 1 or 2 more seasons, I believe. If he does choose to stay in college football for a year or two, fully expect Nebraska to be involved. And I'd look for Shorts to keep him with.
Yeah, and Dane Key has one season plus a red shirt available if he chooses to stay in college and not go the NFL route. So Dane Key, he's my top guy to look at once he officially enters the portal and starts looking around for his next stop, if that's in his future. Tim, before we get out of here, let's just talk a little bit about Garret McGuire. What spent the past 2 seasons as Nebraska's receivers coach. A little bit up and down. I loved the development that he he showed in 2023 with when he was kind of forced to play some true freshmen out there, and Malachi Coleman, Jalen Lloyd, um, Alex Bullock was kind of thrust into some playing time. Um, like after I think it was Isaiah or not Isaiah Xavier Betts wound up leaving the program unexpectedly or maybe expectedly in fall camp that season, and plus some injuries, season-ending injuries to key veteran guys like Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, and yeah, Marcus Washington. But what do you think about McGuire heading back to Texas, heading back to Lubbock, where he knows some people, some family, and his dad. What do you think about his time at Nebraska?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in retrospect, if you look at what Nebraska did and what the plan was, I think if you were to, put some truth serum into Matt Rule and ask him what his plan was when he got to Nebraska, I think the original plan was to keep Mickey Joseph around as wide receivers coach. And then Mickey had, obviously the legal issues that popped up, and he's out of football right now. And so it's one of those situations that just didn't really work out for Nebraska, and they had to pivot last minute. Brought McGuire in, who proved himself to be a good recruiter, a good relationship builder. But the on-field development just wasn't there. We hadn't seen strides from the room. The ones that took advantage of the opportunities kind of were the ones that came on campus ready-made to play, and the Ja'Cory Barneys, the Jamal Banks, etc. Yeah, and it's one of those situations that's tough because for him, is his future still sky high? I think he's got a sky high trajectory. People praise him
Mhm.
for his ability on the whiteboard, his X's and O's knowledge. I still think there's a world where he's a really good offensive coordinator, really good offensive mind. It's just, some people are meant to be coordinators and some people are meant to be position coaches. And sometimes those two skills don't necessarily go hand in hand. For a guy that is young, he's about like a year older than me or so. A guy that's real young, it's tough. It's um, tough to develop. It's something that only comes with experience. It takes years and years of experience to learn how to develop talent, how to turn, an unfinished product into a finished product, how to turn a toolsy receiver into a complete wide receiver. It takes time and it takes energy and it takes effort. So it's tough, and I know Nebraska would have liked to keep him around somehow, some way, whether that's as a recruiter, because he does provide really good value as a recruiter
Mhm.
down south. Just the fact that his departure caused some ruffled some feathers within the class and forced Nebraska to kind of have to circle back and make a signing day push to keep Jeremiah Jones in the boat. Says
Mhm.
a lot about the relationships McGuire built and kind of the impact he had in his time at Nebraska. So he'll be missed as a recruiter, no doubt. And I think you're going to see Nebraska kind of dial back their efforts in the Dallas Fort Worth area in particular, where his relationships are really strong. But Daikiel's going to change things. I think Daikiel's going to
Mhm.
have his idea of what where he wants Nebraska to be focused. I think he's going to have an idea of what receivers he's going to target, and I think he's going to bring just a more structure and development to that wide receiver room.
Yeah, well said. I don't think I need to add any more to that outside of it's a loss on the recruiting side for Nebraska. But at the end of the day, I don't think Garret McGuire is going to be a bad football coach. I think he's going to be a really good football coach, and he's got a lot of years ahead of him to work on that. And his time at Nebraska does not tell me whatsoever that he's going to be a bad football coach. I think he's going to be a good football coach. He's very smart. Listen to him talk in press conferences. I feel like I learn something every single time. So good luck to Garret McGuire.
For sure. Obviously still figuring out who's going to end up staying with the program and who's not, but the news of Shorts joining the program, is there anyone in particular looking at that wide receiver room you think this really benefits?
Ja'Cory Barty Jr. Just from the comparisons to Tank Dell, that's the first one that tops my mind when thinking about this thing, just because of the electric, kind of touch that Ja'Cory has in him, the juice that he provides. Just thinking about past Dana Holgorsen offenses. I mean, he just fits. I think Ja'Cory Barney Jr. is going to be in for a fun ride at Nebraska as long as Dana Holgorsen's calling the plays. So yeah, the Ja'Cory Barney / Tank Dell comparison, I think, is a good one. And Tim, you were one of the first ones to say that. So props to you. It makes a lot of sense.
For sure. And I was going to say is another one I would keep an eye on. I think Quinn Clark, I think that's a guy that as they continue to develop him, Carter Nelson as well. Both those
Mhm.
guys just learning, a lot of the nuances of playing college football at this level, learning how to beat press, learning how to separate, learning how to run routes, learning how to be productive in a Dana Holgorsen offense. Shorts himself was productive in an offense. He's overseen guys that have been uber productive in those offenses. So I think he's going to have a vision for how to get the best out of these guys. And yeah, for a group that needs development, I think this is a perfect guy to be in charge of it. And he's only going to help bring some talent in. And I think we're going to see that once the portal opens and in the future recruiting classes to come.
Yeah, and another guy, just another name to throw out there, Janiron Bonner. He
Oh
was
yeah,
somebody, yeah, he was somebody who Dana really kind of seemed to be interested in those final three games when he was calling the plays. Bonner was getting some screens out on the perimeter, getting the ball in his hands in space. I mean, he's a big guy at 6'2", 220 pounds who could do something with it. So I think Dana Holgorsen liked him some Janiron Bonner. It's going to be fun to see how that progresses if Bonner stays at Nebraska.
for sure, no doubt. Yep, we'll be back with another video here in the next couple of weeks and or next couple of days. Sorry. Obviously we'll have recruiting blitz this next week, recapping signing day and talking about what's ahead in the 2026 class. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, keep it locked over at InsideNebraska.com and the Inside Nebraska YouTube channel. As more transfer portal news drops, as more coaching news drops, Nebraska's in the midst of a defensive coordinator search. Nebraska has a lot on their mind. A lot of things to work through here in these next couple of weeks. And so we'll be here delivering the latest as it all comes in. From Steve, Marik, and I, we're out.